Joining me now is Wolfe Research's Tobin Marcus. Tobin, it's great to have you on. It's interesting because the managed care companies, those stocks are all trading pretty dramatically lower today. Is that the takeaway, that these ACA subsidies, or at least some sort of vote that gets put into place in time to add stability to that market, that is doomed?
So certainly there will be a vote, as we just heard, that has been promised to Democrats by Senate Majority Leader Thune. But that vote, I think, very likely will fail. I think that's going to be a vote on sort of Democrats' chosen policy. They thus far have not succeeded in getting Republicans on board for any of that. So I think them having capitulated on their kind of core healthcare demands is one piece of it. But the bigger thing that's made us more pessimistic over the past 72 hours is this hard negative pivot that President Trump and many Senate Republicans took on the ACA subsidies over the weekend. President Trump calling instead for, using the same amount of money to pre-fund FSAs or HSAs for consumers directly. I think that's a plan with a lot of questions about it that's not going to have bipartisan buy-in and probably leaves the two parties at loggerheads. Interesting.
What do you think brought more Democratic senators to the table here? I mean, because Senator Thune had basically suggested this and made a promise like this in the past as well. So what do you think is different now?
Yeah, that's right. Pretty much this is the same deal that's been on the table for the past several weeks in terms of the Republican offers to Democrats. So I think we saw a few things. One, there was, I think, real anxiety building about some of the consequences of the shutdown that had been intensifying in terms of SNAP, in terms of interruptions to travel as we head towards Thanksgiving. Even with, Republicans taking a lot of the political heat, some of these moderate Democratic senators weren't willing to hold out on that. And then I think with President Trump having made this sort of hard pivot away from the possibility of a bipartisan deal on the ACA subsidies towards these sort of heavy calls for Senate Republicans to do away with the filibuster to end the shutdown, Democrats basically gave up on the possibility of getting a better substantive outcome. And so they figured they just, sort of call it quits, try and take a political win to the extent that they can and not keep holding out for substantive concessions.
Are lawmakers in the House going to be a wild card here, or should we really just factor in, should investors expect that we are going to have an end to the shutdown by the end of the week?
I think it's a fairly firm expectation that we'll have an end to the shutdown by the end of the week, probably somewhere between Wednesday and Friday, but the timing is still developing. President Trump is going to need to lean on House Republicans to get this done because there's not going to be a lot of Democratic support in the House. House Democrats are going to be pretty angry about this, but they'll probably get a handful of House Democratic votes. And then more importantly, I think the vast majority of House Republicans will follow the president's lead on this. So some possibility of a negative surprise, but not a high possibility.
Yeah, I want to go back to this idea of furloughs and cuts to federal employees and this idea about back pay, the fact that all that seems to be getting restored potentially through this deal via lawmakers. I mean, how much of a setback is it, if at all, to the administration, given the fact that this was seen, for better or worse, as an opportunity to make cuts to government?
I always thought that was more rhetoric than reality in terms of the idea that you could use the shutdown as an occasion to do mass firings. There was a lot of talk about that. President Trump was posting these videos of OMB Director Russ Vought as the Grim Reaper and talking about the sort of truly mass firings. But ultimately, the ability to do reductions in force is not affected by the shutdown. They were able to do that before. They'll be able to do that after. And so what we've seen over the course of the past 8 months since he ordered agencies to prepare for RIFs in the spring is that they don't really want to do mass firings. And so I think that's why we saw, despite all the sort of sound and fury, we only ever saw about 4,000 workers dismissed, indications that might get up to 10,000. So, reversing that is not nothing, but ultimately the scale of this effort was just not that big.